So right now in our application, we're bringing in all of the data and pasting it into a variable called artists. We probably want to bring in the data as a file because it'd be easier to manage that way. Now, in traditional JavaScript, you can use what's called an XHR request to bring in data from a JSON or an XML document. You probably know that technique as AJAX. In the AngularJS version, we can access external data by using something called a service. A service is nothing more than a small piece of code that takes care of common tasks. In this case, we're interested in a particular service, and it's called HTTP. Now, the job of this service is to handle communications between an HTTP server and your application. It's pretty easy to use. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take all this data away from this variable. So I'm just going to grab all this and delete it. And then we're going to use our HTTP service. All we have to do is add it right next to the scope and the controller. So I'll say $HTTP. And now we have access to the HTTP services methods and properties. So what we'll do next is access the HTTP service and ask it to get some information from a JSON file. So our JSON file is in the JS folder, and it's called data.json. Now, if that request is successful, so we'll say .success, then I want this program to execute a function. This is going to be a function literal. We don't really need to give it a name, but it's going to get some data from the JSON feed. And once that data is received, then it's going to do something. So what it's going to do is grab the data, and we'll put it in our scope.artists variable. So we'll just say, hey, get the data and put it right there. And that's pretty much it. But you're actually going to run into some problems when you try to see this on a browser. So let me go ahead and save that, and I'll grab this index.html page, and I'll preview it in a browser, and we'll see what happens. It doesn't look like anything came in, so let's take a look at the console to see if we get any errors. So I'm going to click right here and go to the console, and you'll notice that right here it's giving us an error, and it says XML HTTP requests cannot load this file. Cross-origin requests are only supported for HTTP. Now, this is a problem with Chrome specifically. It has a policy that when you request data, it has to come from the same server that requested it. And right now, we're not really running things from a server. We're running things from our local computer. So it's not allowing you to get a file if it doesn't come from a server. That's because AJAX communication is supposed to happen between a client and a server. So we're going to need to fix that. There's a couple of things that you can do. There's a couple of really easy things and some a little bit more complicated. The easiest thing to do is to use a different browser. If you happen to have Safari installed on your machine, then if we go to our page with our file, you'll see that it loads up the data just fine. So a browser like Safari doesn't have the same restrictions as Google Chrome. So that's option number one. The other option is to just load your application onto a server. As long as this app is in a server, it's going to work in the same exact way, and Google Chrome is not going to complain about it. Now, that's not convenient for working in development. It's better if Chrome would just let us read the file. So if you want to read from the file locally, the other option would be to install a server on your machine. Now, you could do this in a variety of ways, and we've got a couple of courses that can help you with this. So if you want to learn how to install a server, you can take a look at installing Apache, MySQL, and PHP with David Gassner, or Node.js Essential Training with Joe LeBlanc. Another way to do this is to trick Chrome into starting up and not requiring that same domain policy. So to do that, we can go to this page in Stack Overflow. Now, if you want to start Chrome without this same origin policy, you have to type in some commands, and it sort of depends on which browser you're using. So I'm going to go right here. For a Mac, you're going to need to open Terminal and run this command. I'm actually going to select this right here. I'm going to copy it into my clipboard, and I'm going to have to quit Chrome. So I'm going to quit Chrome, and I'm going to pull up the terminal, and I'm going to issue this command. So when you do that, you'll see that you get a version of Chrome that says you're using an unsupported command line flag, stability and security will suffer. So now I'm going to go back into my code and go ahead and open this in a browser. By default, Sublime Text is using Chrome as its browser, and you can see that now it comes up just fine. So this is going to work until you quit Chrome and restart it again. So you have to remember to issue that terminal command whenever you are developing this kind of application. It's sort of a little bit of a pain, but it's no big deal. So you've got several options there. This is the one that I think works pretty well as long as you haven't restarted Chrome. Now, there's something else that I should mention here. A lot of developers like to minify their JavaScript so that their code is smaller when it gets launched on a real website. As a matter of fact, when we're importing our AngularJS JavaScript file, it's a minified version of the library. So here's what a minified version looks. All the variables are condensed, and all the tabs and extra spaces are gone. Now, minification can cause problems with Angular because of the way it works internally. In order to fix that, we're going to have to modify our script so that it uses the HTTP service a little bit differently, protecting some of the names from minification inside an array. So the code is just going to be a little bit different. Let me go ahead and close this and make this window a lot bigger because this is what we're going to work with now. So here after my controller, I'm going to pass along an array, and in this array, I'm going to pass along the scope as well as my HTTP service in an array, so these things will not be messed up by minification. Then after that, I'm going to pass a function. I really don't need this my controller name. This can just be a function literal, so we'll leave it like this. And just like before, we'll again pass the scope and HTTP into it, and the rest of our application should remain the same. So I'm going to save this and again go over here to the index.html file. Looks like one thing I need to do is make sure that I don't close my array right here. It's really protecting this entire function and these two names. So I'm going to get it from right here and make sure that I close it out right there. Let me go ahead and save this and then right-click and preview this in a browser. And we should be getting in our data from our file into Google Chrome. The HTTP service is really perfect for bringing in external files, but you do have to watch out for some issues, especially that same domain policy. Working with services makes your application a lot smaller and easier to update in the future.